Hello everyone, and thank you for joining today's session. My name is Reese and I'll be your moderator today. We're going to kick off in about a minute or so. We're just waiting so everyone has a chance to join. If you haven't done so already, please do register for this session. I'll be sending a link to do so in the chat just now. And I'll also be sharing very shortly a link to the resources document for this session. So that's going to include the notebook that we're going to be using, the slides that we're going to be covering, as well as a lot of related content. I think we've got about 5 or 6 other AI agents code alongs in there for you to take your fancy. So yeah, please do check out the resources document that I will be sharing very shortly. For everyone watching on LinkedIn, you are going to have to manually copy and paste the link. The link won't be clickable. So yeah, sorry about that. If you do not like watching on LinkedIn, please head over to our YouTube channel where you can also subscribe to our channel and see all the other video tutorials we've been putting out as well. So the links of both of those are in the comments on both LinkedIn and on YouTube. If you're watching on Facebook, please let us know if you've got the comments as well. For this session, we are going to be covering quite a lot of ground. So it's going to be slightly different to our typical code longs. We're going to be looking at kind of the architecture and walking through the code in this section, rather than having a workbook to code in. So yeah, please do check out the notebook. But yeah, this session is great for a watch along live and then try it by yourself afterwards. There are a few extra services you will need to connect up as well. So you're going to need a few API keys. We're going to be covering those bits at the start. So for anyone that's just joined, thank you so much for joining today's session. My name is Reese. I'll be your moderator today. We are just about to get started, and for everything else that you may need in the session, please consult the resources document that's shared in the chat. I'll be posting it again very shortly, just in case anyone's missed it. On YouTube, it is pinned to the chat, and on LinkedIn, I'll be posting another comment just now. So yeah, if you want to watch along and have a go at getting into the notebook yourself, you're going to need a Google account. We're working in Google Colab today, but yeah, please do check out the resources document. That is the best place for everything. Brilliant. I'm going to now hand over to your host for today's session, Richie. Richie, please take it away.
Hi there, data scamps and data champs. This is Richie. We're going to kick off in just a couple of seconds' time. In the meantime, please do let us know where you are joining from. Always nice to see where our audience is calling in from. Kicking things off today, I think one of the most fun AI products, for me at least, that's been built this year is Google's Notebook LM product. So this generates a podcast from a document. Very fun to use. And so today we're going to build a very simple version of that. That is, we're going to make several agents that are all going to work together, and they're going to generate a podcast. So it's going to be multi-agent, multimodal, multi-everything AI application. And we're going to be using CrewAI in order to do that. Our guest is Tony Kipkemboi. He is a senior developer advocate at CrewAI. So right from the heart of the software platform. So welcome, Tony.
Thank you for having me here. Excited to be here.
Excellent. Yeah, excited to have you here. So Tony spends his days helping developers learn how to use CrewAI's AI agent platform. So he's got a mixed background in data analytics and data engineering. He's sort of found his way into AI. He's an expert in community building and training people on using data and AI. So before his time at CrewAI, he was a developer advocate at Snowflake. He's also been a data engineer at Booz Allen Hamilton and a data analyst at Bloomberg. So with that, please take it away, Tony.
Yeah, thank you for that great intro, Richie. So hey everyone, first time here. So I'm gonna start off. You've heard what we're going to be building: a podcast, automation based, essentially an agent's given a piece of paper, research paper. It's able to decompose it, summarize it, and then generate a transcript or a dialogue between two people talking about the contents of that paper. And then we're going to even go another step forward and actually supplement extra research based around that topic, basically allowing another agent to access the web, go do some extra research on other material that's not included in that paper to enrich the conversation of our podcast hosts, and then we generate a podcast out of that. So, but before that, I just want to start off with, first of all, what's the main point of this, right? How do you deploy useful AI agents, or how do you even get started with AI agents with CrewAI? So think of this as more of like a high level best practices. This is like the few things that I just want you to go away with if you're going to be using CrewAI. So let's go ahead and get started here. So starting here with just CrewAI fundamentals and foundations, the basic things, and we'll go in deeper depth a bit on the Colab notebook that we'll be going to be working through. But the first thing that I always try to say is with CrewAI, we have, first of all, agents. So these are first-class citizens within CrewAI. So you have the agent, and then an agent needs to have a task, which are this ones on the side here that you can see. So that's you have the agents that have an LLM, and then they have a task, and then they also have tools, and there's memory. So it's a lot, right? But just follow along with me. It gets a bit easier, and they all together form a crew. So I'm going to use an analogy here to make it much simpler. So think of a crew, which is everything within this box, and there's agents, tasks, LLMs, and tools, all of it combined. Think of a crew as an organization, as a company. So in your company, for example, you have different people that work in different departments. So you have engineering department, you have sales, you have marketing. Those are different departments within your company. Now let's pick one department, maybe engineering, for example, for the context of this. So within engineering, you also have different people with different roles in engineering. You have software engineer, you have the data scientist, you have a data analyst, you have a PM. There's so many people within that organization. So the people within that department, think of them as agents. So that's just the body itself, the person. That person is just the agent. Now, when you're working in that department, maybe as a software engineer, you need a task, right? You have things that you're expected to do. So that's your job description. There's KPIs attached to what you need to do every quarter or every month. And so with the agent as well, the agent is the body. Think of the task as what they're expected to do, their job description. The task is you need to do this. This is the expected output we expect out of you. So that's that. But for you to be able to accomplish those tasks as a software engineer here in this case, you need tools to be able to get your job done. So first of all, you need a laptop. That's from the work. You need access to internet. You need access to specific databases to pull data and do whatever you need to do. So those are tools. And agents as well, they need tools to be able to accomplish some of the tasks that you give them. If it's searching the web, for example, they need to have access to search the web and do everything they need to do there. And then there's also memory. So memory is also very important for these agents. So they need to remember what they've done, and so that it informs them on what to do next. And I think there's been recently a lot of conversation about context engineering, some might call memory engineering. So that's the concept that for memory here. So agents need to remember what they need to do there. So with that, and the last thing here is the LLM. So the LLM piece, think of it as the brain of the agent. So agents, they accomplish tasks, but they need a brain to help them actually think through these tasks and actually accomplish some of these tasks using the input and output from the tools as well. So that's a quick background on a crew. And if you have so many agents and so many tasks, all of them orchestrating a specific function, they form a crew. In CrewAI, we call them a crew. It's like if I ask you what's your crew, you might tell me, such and such a person is, in my part of my crew. Those are your friends. So same thing here as a crew, you accomplish things together. Now, talking about CrewAI, if you're going to spend time building with CrewAI, I recommend using the 80-20 rule. What do I mean by that? I mean, 80% of the time when you're building these agents, spend it on defining your agents, defining your tasks, and making sure that you've got those tight knit, especially the tasks, because that's what the agent will be able to do. So optimizing the prompts there will be very important. And then follow up with the agents. The agent, defining the agent part should be the easy part, because you're just defining an agent that is supposed to accomplish the task that you've described. And I'm going to walk you through all this as well. So there's the role of the agent, there's a goal of the agent, there's a backstory of the agent, and this is the framework we use. So the role, you think of it as a job description. We mentioned software engineer, so that would be the role there. And then the goal would be write software to build a certain product for a company. That's the goal. And then the backstory is maybe they've had 10 years of experience building software for companies. So that's same thought process here for the agent. And then we have specific things here like sequential. How do you want to run this entire crew? Do you want there to be a manager that kind of controls everything? Or do you want just first agent starts, finishes the task, hands over to the next all the way down? So there's different ways of doing this. There's hierarchical that you've probably seen. So different, depending on the use case, I would say that what determines what process you're going to choose. But usually I recommend starting with sequential and then build the complexity on top of that to go to hierarchical when needed. But sequential should be good to start off with. Now, with the 80-20 rule that I was talking about, this is what I meant. So 80% spend that on building a task. And this is how you build a task in CrewAI. So this is an example here that I created a while back. So financial analysis task, and you see how you've kind of, the description is pretty robust and pretty much laid out exactly what it needs to do. There's different aspect of it that you might want to consider in terms of, if you're using something like Anthropic model or OpenAI model, they have their own best practices for prompting their models. So you want to keep that in mind. If you want to use a specific model, then you might want to optimize the prompt to fit exactly what their prompting guidelines are. For example, if an Anthropic likes using XML tags, so you might want to use XML tags within your prompts. So that's why I say 80% of your time should be spent building the tasks itself. And then after that, you go to the agents. And so here is the agents. So for agents, you see the role. So there's a role for the agent here, financial analysis, data analyst, specializing in SaaS metrics. That's pretty specific, right? And so there's a twist to that. You don't want to be too specific, especially if your agent is not that specific, because then it might just narrow itself down to, just specializing in SaaS metrics. But if you just want it to be just a financial data analyst, that might be just enough. But if you really want that to be a very niched example that you can use and does that iteratively, and it doesn't do anything beyond that, then you might want to go a bit more complex as well there. Then there's aligning most of the agent's role to real world archetypes, and this is what we were talking about. So software engineer, you want to highlight that or assign that to same role that we as regular humans are accustomed to, and that kind of translates to the agent as well. The goal. So the goal here is what they need to do, and this is also very, very important. It's essentially saying, this is what I expect you to do. It's like a job description. This is what you're expected to do every day, and continue doing that. And then we have the backstory. This is where you get to, give them some flowers here, try to pump them up to be able to do what they need to do. So for example, here I told it to, he has 12 years of experience in financial analysis at top investment firms. So that, for me, usually it's a signal to the model that the quality of output that you need to produce from this task that we've given you is supposed to be somebody that has 12 years of experience, in a sense, right? So, and sometimes that translates. It's all prompt gymnastics here, but they tend to produce some really good outputs as well if you guide it that way. But also, there's so many variables to that. There's also what models you pick that also determine the final output as well. And so there's other questions about, so with agents, do we need to pick a specialist or just a generalist agent? So for example, if you have one generalist agent that you write, you give it as a writer, and maybe your task is really to write a blog, a technical blog. If you give it a writer, it's good, but it's not optimized, because it might just write a poem, right? It might be just an agent that's really good at poem writing, but it's not good at technical blog writing. So you might want to be a bit more specific. That helps the agent also produce better outputs as well. And then there's balancing specialization and versatility. So for this one, just really avoiding narrow scopes. And like I mentioned, being able to balance, at what point do you maybe specify exactly what you want your agents to do? So that's maybe some of the things you want to watch out for. So depending on what your use case, and you hear me saying a lot, depending on your use case. So this is where I say, spend most of your time figuring out your use case and how that would lay out, and describing everything that needs to be done, so that when you assign an agent to that task, it's pretty clear. Same thing as a human. If I give you a task that is very ambiguous or not too clear, you might not accomplish pretty well. So same thing with the agents. You want to be very clear as well with the agents. And there's expertise levels, novice, intermediate. Usually people pick expert and world class. There's not really need to pick novice or intermediate for most of the tasks, because we want good quality out of your outputs. And then just best practices, if you're just going to do production for the agents, add boundaries, things like guardrails, and we'll talk about that as well. And there's integrations. There's so many things now, MCP servers as well, that you can add on top of your agents. But I think that's a conversation for another topic, apart from what we're doing today. But there's so many things. There's security aspect. Security is becoming a big thing at the moment. So being able to secure your agents, the input coming in from the user to your agent is very important, because that needs to be pre-filtered before it gets to the model, because if it's a prompt injection, then that kind of messes up your agents to begin with. So it might be adding a filter in between the user input and actually that input hitting the agent. There needs to be a filter in there as well. But that's just the beginning of the tip of the iceberg on agent security. All right, so that kind of concludes our overview introduction. So if somebody has any questions, feel free to add it in the chat in the meantime. But I'm going to go ahead and jump to our notebook here so we can get started with some coding. So cool. You probably have access to this notebook as well. Should be in the links in the chat. So feel free to go find it there if you haven't found it. And so the main point of this notebook that I have here is really we give it a research paper, and I'm gonna pick one from Archive. And if you're not familiar with Archive, Archive is this section of the web where people publish papers. And so people publish different papers. And so I came here. We could come here and pick a random paper from here that one recent one. So I went to archive.org and I just searched AI agents. And these are the papers that it produced that potentially were recent papers. So we can go down here and look for some that for example, I think this one was pretty interesting. Scam agents, how AI agents can simulate human level scam calls. So I think that would make for a good podcast, don't you think? I think it would make a cool podcast. And then after this, you just download it, and I've downloaded it already to my local environment. And if you want to just kind of have the same file, we'll share as well with you what the URL for this file, but it should be pretty easy. Any PDF would work, just FYI. So you don't need to follow this exact PDF that I'm using here. But then once you've downloaded that, the next step for you is just have that saved locally, and we'll use that down the road here. So this is kind of the overview of what we'll be doing. So we start here with the input. The input that we'll pass to our agents is a PDF file, which we've just downloaded. And we'll have a couple agents, which form the multi-agents. Each is specialized on a specific thing that they need to do. One will check the paper, it will summarize the paper, generate a full summary of the paper. Another one will go ahead and generate a script of two people talking about the contents of that paper. And there's another one that's also going to do web search to kind of fill in the gaps that maybe the paper didn't address, or any new information that related to the paper, and add it as context so that when the script generation agent can use that extra content to create a very interesting conversation between two people. And then after that, there's another agent that I added on top of that actually enhances the first generated script or the first generated dialogue between two people talking about that paper. And the goal for that is really to make it sound more human, add a little bit heuristics that humans would have in their conversation. So that's the goal of that, adding that second layer. And this is it goes back to prompting again. It's the first script is generated, dialogue between two people, and then I have another agent that kind of using a different model. This way you can switch between different models. If you find another model is pretty expressive, like 4O is pretty expressive. I think they fixed it recently, but the goal for that is to make it more expressive, make it more human sounding. So the second one should be better than the first dialogue piece. So once it enhances that, I have another agent that then, for each of those outputted dialogues, for each of the people talking, so the first person talks, the second person talks, and as it goes down like that, I want that each of that line passed to 11 Labs. If you're not familiar with 11 Labs, I'm going to show you here real quick what 11 Labs is. So 11 Labs is an AI company that they specialized. Recently, they've expanded to music, but they specialize in generating voices, and you could do text to speech, and I believe speech to text as well. And so they have some APIs that you could use as well. And they have a free tier here. So if you're going to follow along this, feel free to go to their website, get this $0 per month. I think it's 10K credits per month, free individual. Get an API key from that, and just come follow along with our notebook here. Another thing that you'll need here as well is Serper. So Serper allows your agents essentially to have access to search the web. And for this, they'll be able to search Google, and there's an API for that. And here we're using Serper, and they provide 2,500 free queries for you to use. I've been using it for a long time. I don't think I've hit a wall with it. So that's where we should be able to, I'm not sharing that tab. Sorry about that. Thank you. Yes, so this is Serper, and they provide you 2,500 credits, like I mentioned. And essentially, it's a tool that you give to your agent to be able to search the web. So if you tell her to go do something, or the agent thinks, I need information on this, they can actually use this as a tool to go do some web search and bring back the results. So then it gives back to the agent to synthesize that result from that web search and augment that into the task that he needs to do. So same thing here, come here, sign up, get some free credits, and use the API as well within our notebook. And that's the main portion. Now, if we get down here to the API keys, I'll show you where that is. But this is the goal of it. So we'll have specific tools. And see here we have PDF knowledge, which is something that we have within CrewAI. It essentially ingests that PDF and saves it in Chroma database under the hood. So you don't have to think about setting that up. We've done that for you with a class. And then there's Surfer Search, which I just showed. And then we have the audio generator, which will use the 11 Labs API key to generate the audio for each of the individual segments of communication. And then I created another tool that I'll show you down there as well as a podcast mixer. So when each of those individual podcast hosts says, like, have a sentence that they're saying, it gets transcribed by 11 Labs and saves it as that person's, each in like a JSON file. And after that, those are individual segments of audio. So we need to squish them together to form one cohesive MP3. So I created a tool here, and it's using FFmpeg. Essentially what it does, it just puts everything together and all those individual segments of audio and creates one full MP3 audio that you can listen to. And then after that, you can just download the podcast and we can listen to it at the end. So let's go ahead and get started. I think I've done enough talking and explaining what the overview looks like. So first of all, just run of the mill. You have to just install your dependencies. So we have CrewAI tools, 11 Labs, this Python dev. You don't really need this because we are a notebook. There's PyDub and Pydantic. This is PyDub. We'll use this for the audio piece. And IPyWidgets there as well, just to avoid some of the issues here. So that's already finished. So let's just hide the outputs there. And here's what I mentioned with the environment variables. I've added the links there if you want to go ahead and create those API keys on OpenAI. Once you're done, I've added instruction here. So you click this icon right here on the left and save your keys here. So you would just come down here, add a new secret key, paste in the name of, for example, it's OpenAI, get your OpenAI there, paste it in there, and then paste the API key there and save it. And that's all you need to do for each of these segments here as well. And once you've added each one of those, there's other pieces here as well. So from 11 Labs, you would also be able to go to voice within 11 Labs and get a voice ID. So there's so many voices within 11 Labs, but you would need to pick one voice that you like, maybe two people, maybe a female voice, a male voice, or male voice and a male voice, however which voices you like on there. Pick a voice. I picked two of them. I picked Ben's voice and Claudia's voice. And these are just some voices they provide there. You could also clone your voice there and use your voice as one of the hosts if you like, that's another extra step, but pretty easy to set up from their platform. They provide a quick access to and good docs on how to get the ID of any given speaker. And then you add that here as well. So you see here for me, I've added it here. There's Ben voice ID and I've added the ID there as well. So that's all you need to do. And then after that, we need to import all those keys that we've saved here. So to do that, we just use this from google.colab, import user data. And from there, we just set the environment variables here for each one of them. So we have all these API keys. We don't need a couple of this. For example, Anthropic and Cerebrus. I was using those as testing for using different models for each agent. And that's the cool thing about CrewAI that I'll talk about later as well. So with CrewAI, you can use, each agent can have their own special LLM. So not all your agents need to use the same LLM. And that is very important because for each task that you have your agent perform, there's probably a model that's better suited for that task. So optimize for the LLM for the task that you're using as well. Now, what we've done here so far, we've set our environment variables. We've first of all set up, we've installed our environment variables, and we're done with that piece. Now let's go ahead and build the tools that our agents will be able to use. So we've talked about, you have the agent, you have the task, but to accomplish the task, sometimes it needs a tool to accomplish that task. So this is where we're building the tools here first. So the first things here, we're importing a couple imports, but I think there's some standout ones here is audio segment from PyDub. This allows us to edit the audio to sound even better than what we get directly from 11 Labs. And then we import 11 Labs, of course, because we're going to use that here to build a tool that will handle the back and forth from 11 Labs. And then from CrewAI, we're importing CrewAI tool. We're importing base tool. Base tool that allows us to create a tool for CrewAI that our agents can use directly. And then we're importing some Pydantic classes here that we'll use to create some Pydantic models to help us make this even better. So here, let's get started here first. So we have a class here for voice config. We're importing the base model. And essentially what we're doing in this entire section, I've done my best here to comment as much as possible so you know exactly what's happening. I've gone ahead and created a class here that will make the voice even better that we get back from 11 Labs. So for example, here, stability, I've set it a bit, 0.45. So slightly lower kind of gives you more of like a natural variation in tone on how somebody speaks. So in the intonation, when you have to there's inflection when you say specific things. So that controls that. So feel free to come here and tweak it as much as you want and see what it sounds like at the end. But for me, I found 4.5 to be good for my purpose. There's the similarity boost here, higher to maintain consistent voice character. And the 6.5, this kind of balances expressiveness of how much the expressive the sound sounds after it's generated. And then speaker boost essentially just allows for better voice to come off from 11 Labs. So I use that as true. And they have different models within 11 Labs. So the one I picked here is 11 multilingual V2. This means it could just generate different languages, but it's also the highest quality. I'm sure it's changed at this point. I haven't checked in a few weeks, but this is the best that I could find on there. And then the output format, I want it to be MP3. So there's different output formats, but I want it to be in MP3. And then apply text normalization. I want it auto. You can have it on, off, not so important there. So I put it as auto so they can choose whichever one thinks is best. And then here, audio config as well. So we finished with voice config, now audio config. And for this one, the format is MP3, sample rate 48,000. So higher for better quality. If you're an audio person here, you probably are familiar with most of this stuff, better than I am. And then the channel, I put channel 2. And then bitrate 256 kilobytes here. So higher bitrate for clear audio. That's what I'm doing here. So 11 Labs essentially did not provide this out of the box. So I had to build this extra configuration to make the audio sound better. So the first ones that I did not sound much better, like the way I wanted it to. So I had to do some configuration here to help that a bit. So normalization here, normalize the audio true, target loudness, standard podcast loudness, which is minus 14 here. And these are extra things that I went and toggled about. This compression ratio, 2.0 for light compression for voice. Cool. Now let's go to dialogue. So here I'm just setting up Pydantic class basically to have specific dialogue for the podcast generation tool. So here you will have a speaker and their text that they will speak essentially, or the dialogue that they will say. And then we have a class here. Another one is podcast audio generator input, and this will just be taking in audio dialogue for the podcast audio generation tool here as well. And the reason I'm using Pydantic model is to make it much more consistent output from the models, from the agents in a sense. So when the agents perform a specific task, I want them to be consistent in how they produce the output that I want them to. And you'll see it once we start running it. Now we're done with that piece. Now we have another class here for podcast audio generator. And this is basically to enhance the audio generation tool. And so I'm adding extra stuff here. And this is the main tool now that I'm building. So we've done all the simple configuration of Pydantic models up here. Now here we put everything together to form the tool that will generate the audio. So we've imported all these API keys from 11 Labs. We're adding all the voice configs that we've set up there, audio output as well, the directory that we wanted to output each of the audio as well. And then a couple stuff here with argument schema. This is for CrewAI to make sure that the audio is generated correctly. Now we have the init section here. We're just going to start everything off. And then we have you adding the voice, and we'll take the voices that I've saved and added here. And then we have the run, which is the important piece here, is taking in generating audio files for each of the script segments or each of the speakers, each of the dialogue. It's kind of taking that and generating audio and bringing it back and saving it into like a segments folder. And that folder will be here once we start running. So here's an example of what I ran earlier, although I didn't finish it, but it would pop up here in the segments. So when it starts off first, all the data is saved here. So there's going to be a paper summary, podcast script, and then supporting research here for the agent that will do supporting research. And then segments will be individual segments or audio for each of the individual speakers for each timestamp all the way to the end. And then afterwards, once everything kind of gets remixed and have one cohesive MP3, it will be saved here as a final output. So cool. Now that's what's happening entirely on this section right here. And so if you continue, it just kind of takes in all the voices, puts them together at segments and saves it there as well. Now there's a podcast mixer, which I mentioned there a bit. So once all the segments are generated, this mixer essentially takes all those audio and stitches them together to form one cohesive final MP3. So it takes all the files that's already in the output segments and then creates a final output directory here for podcast, the final podcast. And it just creates the directory there. And then it adds, I've added a few things in there, like adding silence and using crossfades between each one of them as well. So that works out pretty good and makes it sound much better. Not to the Notebook LM level, because they have a proprietary model that sounds really good, and it's a lot of interweaving of the voices, which is much better than what this will sound, but this is as close as I could get it to be, and we'll see it in a second. And now we have, you know, paths here. All this is just really saving it back to the MP3, and this is also having the highest quality, and then professional sample rates, what we talked about earlier as well there, and then final there. Now let's go ahead and run this file. I don't think I've ran this one's from here, and that one. Now the other piece here is setting up the directory structure. So this is the directory structure. So we have the outputs. So this one essentially just sets up the outputs, and we have segments, final, and then to just organize it in a better way. So if I run another one, this one I ran a few hours ago. So if I run it again, it will create another folder within here once we get started, and it will save all the outputs. The reason for this is if I run different files, I want each of the outputs that are in, all the videos, all the audio that I created, I want all of them to be saved so that I can go back and reference instead of like overwriting or everything that we've saved here at the given time. Now let's go ahead and upload our PDF. So remember the PDF we downloaded. So this is the place where you upload that PDF. And so here, I'm just using collab.files here, function they provide. And I'm going to grab this scam agents, and I'm going to save it there, and it's going to upload. I'm going to zoom in a little bit if you can see that better. So it's already saved this under knowledge scam agents. And if we come here to knowledge, we should be able to see that file there. So here it is. And if you click a bit, you'll be able to see that file. You can download that way. But the goal of this here of saving to knowledge is CrewAI already knows if you have a knowledge file, it will already kind of know the knowledge file. So you just need to pass whatever it's in there, and it will use it, basically put that in a ChromaDB, of which you see a ChromaDB has already been instantiated down here. It will save that to a ChromaDB, and then we'll be able to use that to do summaries and do everything that we need to do to be able to generate this final paper here for us. Now that we've saved the file that we need, now let's go up and set up our agents and tasks. So this is standard CrewAI. So import CrewAI, you need to import agent, task, crew, process, and LLM. So this is stuff that I had mentioned earlier, and they're pretty straightforward. And then here we have CrewAI knowledge source. We need to use the PDF knowledge source because we are using PDF, and essentially what this class does for us, it does the heavy lifting of taking that PDF, doing some chunking, adding it to ChromaDB so that we can actually use it to generate queries and query it throughout the process here to actually understand the paper. So that's the goal of this portion here. So let's run that. Now, this is where we pass in that paper that we generated to be indexed into ChromaDB. So if we run this cell, we have a research paper, PDF knowledge source, file path, and then we just pass the file name, which we already saved into our knowledge there. Now, we have a couple pedantic models here as well. So paper summary. So when the agents run and to generate the paper summary, this is what we want them to generate the paper or the summary to look like. It needs to have a title, main findings, methodology of the paper, key implications, limitations, future work, and the summary date of the paper as well. So that's what we want the summary to look like. And the reason for having these pedantic models, and we'll pass this to our agents as well, especially within the task. Too fast? Thank you for the feedback. Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure I get to time because I know we're going to be coming up on time here in a sec. So, and I'm trying to slow down a little bit. But the goal for the paper summary here for this role is when an agent runs a given task, for example, summarizing a paper, if you don't give it a pedantic model, for example, each time it'll just generate a different summary, right? And it might look like it has a title. Sometimes it doesn't have it because this model is not deterministic. So they will just do whatever they need to do. But if you use pedantic model, it's more like enforcing, more like a structured output each time. So if we using the pedantic model here and we define what you want the agent to output each time, it will always output a summary that has the content of the summary might be slightly different, but at least the structure will be there. It will have a title, it will have a main findings, methodology, key implication, limitation, future work, and the summary date within that output that it does. And for each pedantic model, we can assign that to specific tasks that it needs to do. And so that's for the paper summary. And then we have another one here for dialogue. So for the agent that will work to generate the dialogue, we wanted to generate a speaker, which is the name of the speaker, and the text. And for the speaker names, I picked two of them. I picked Julia and Guido. So if you're a Python data person, you might see something that I was trying to do here. It's not their voices, but Julia, the language, and Guido van Rossum for Python. Hopefully you get the gist there. But that was kind of what I was going for at that time. And then there's text here, which is the actual dialogue or the line that the speaker will be speaking. And this is each line they will speak throughout the entire podcast. So I want them to be structured this way. And this will allow it to generate a JSON that looks like that. And then we have the podcast script, and this is just the dialogue itself. And now here we have audio generation. This is segment files and the final podcast, which they will be saved within their respective folders within when I run it. So there's podcasts and segments there. So that's the goal for that. Now let's go ahead and run those pedantic model classes. Now we get to the fun part. We're getting to the point where we're almost running this agents for us. Now, remember I mentioned for each CrewAI agents, you can assign individual LLMs for it. This is where you might want to change if you want. But for me, I picked this one. So we can change this, of course, to different models. So here I picked O3 Mini. I could change this to O5 Mini. GPT-5 Mini if I want. And then there's O1, there's O3 Mini. And as a matter of fact, let me just change that to GPT-5 Mini. And there's O1 here. So summary part is generating a summary of the paper. So which model do you actually want to generate a summary of a paper? Given a PDF, which model do you want to generate a summary? So you can mix and match. It could be OpenAI, it could be Gemini, whatever models you want. You can change this here to be what you want. And so we have a summary. This is for the summary LLM. And then we have a script LLM. This will generate the script that we'll be able to use for the first time. And then for the script enhancer, this will do enhancements on top of the script that will be generated by the first agent. So actually, to generate a summary, we don't need a powerful model. So let's use GPT-4 or Mini. And then here, for the script enhancer, let's use GPT-5 Mini to generate the script. So that's the goal for this. And then the audio LLM here will be the one that generates the audio. So we don't need a powerful model at all for this because it's not adding any context. It's just really kind of orchestrating the piece of generating the podcast. Now let's run that to make sure that's saved. Now let's go ahead and set up 11 Lab podcast hosts. So here we're creating or configuring the tools of what we've set up already up there. So creating the segments. And then for Julia, we want Julia to be an enthusiastic expert. So here, this is Julia. And we pass in the environment variables for Julia, which we've already saved. And then the configuration for Julia, what do we want Julia to sound like? So here, stability 0.35, so more variation for natural enthusiasm within their voice. And then we have similarity boost, this kind of maintaining voice clarity. And then there's style here, good expressiveness without being over the top. So 6.5. We don't want them to be too giddy. And I think that's something that's been true for most of the AI host speakers. It's just sounding really super enthusiastic about things that they shouldn't. It's improved over time though. And then Guido here, engage and curious. And so we've had a stability 4.4, 7.5 as well, balanced expressiveness. And then what they will output there. So let's run that. Now, let's go ahead and build the agents that will do the work. So this is the work process. So we have a first agent that will just do research. So the goal is just research analysts and the role for them. And then the goal is just create comprehensive yet accessible research paper summaries. And they're a PhD researcher with a talent for breaking down complex academic papers into clear, understandable summaries. And they excel at identifying key findings and their real-world implications. And we've given them the model that we use here as a summary LLM. And the verbose true here is basically when we run these agents, we want them to actually output exactly what they're doing, what they're thinking, how the outputs are coming out, and we want to see that. If you put it as false, you won't be able to see anything when you run, essentially, but it will still be running. And now we have another agent here. We're calling it research support agent. And what it does is research support specialist. And their goal is to find current context and supporting material relevant to their paper's topic. Like I mentioned, we give it a topic, we give it the paper, the one generates a summary, and then these other agents tries to find material and content that supports the PDF or the content that are in the PDF or in the paper, essentially. So trying to make it a more robust conversation in a sense. So your versatile research assistant who excels at finding supplementary information across academic fields. You have a talent for connecting academic research with real-world applications, current events, and practical examples, regardless of the field. You know how to find credible sources and relevant discussions across various domains. Same thing here. We're giving it verbose true. And then the search tool here, we're giving it the SERPADEV tool, which we've already instantiated. up here as well. And then we're giving it the script LLM. So that's the goal for them, to be able to use that LLM to generate a script. But they'll just be using that to do the research. It's not going to generate a script, but it'll be using the script LLM, which up here, script LLM is the O1. We're making it use O1 to do the web search. Now we have the script writer. And for this one, it just generate an engaging and educational podcast script about technical topics. And this is all they do. And we've told it, skilled podcast writer who specializes in making technical content engaging and accessible. Your natural dialogue between two hosts, Julia, a knowledgeable expert who explains concepts clearly, and Guido, an informed co-host who asks thoughtful questions and helps guide the discussion. So that's the goal for this. And then we've given it the LLM. And then this is the script enhancer. And I think this is pretty interesting, at least for me. Enhance the podcast script to make more engaging while maintaining educational value. And you can see here what I've done is you're a veteran podcast producer who specializes in making technical content, both entertaining and informative. But what I did at the end here is you worked on shows like Lex Friedman's podcast, Hardcore History, and Joe Rogan Experience, bringing their signature blend of entertainment and education. That's just the little nudges, because it knows who those people are and it knows how their content sounds like and looks like. So we're just kind of telling them, can you try to add this extra humanity to the podcast, essentially. And now we have a final audio generator agent here that kind of puts everything together and generates audio and natural sounding voices for each of the ones that we're going to generate here. So let's go ahead and run these agents. We're just instantiating them. Now we need to build the tasks for each of those agents. So for each of those agents, there's a summary one. We're telling it exactly what to do. So researcher, your mission is drive paper provided in the paper and uncover its core insights. We're telling it exactly what to do there. And then we're telling it expected output, a clear, well-structured summary that covers all the critical aspects of the paper. And then the agent that will do this job is the researcher. So you have to assign the agent to the task. And then also the output Pydantic is the Pydantic models we created up top. So this is the paper summary so that it knows how to output the final output, what it needs to have within it. And then the output file where it will output the final output of what it's generated within this task. We're giving it the path to that file that will save it in there. So we'll save it here in the output, and it will save it within metadata and summary JSON. So that's the goal for that. And then we have some supporting research tasks. I won't go in depth in all of them, but I'm just going to peruse through all of them. So we have the supporting research task for the agent, and then podcast task for the agent, and enhanced script task. So these are pretty extensive, and I really urge you to look through them very carefully, because you could see how I prompted specific things for them to do. For example, here you can see the script enhancer here. I told it to infuse natural reactions, sprinkle in casual phrases like, oh, really? Or wait, that's interesting, to capture spontaneous moments. And I'm doing that intentionally because if I just leave it to the agent to decide what to do, it will just have a lot of things that will just make it sound like an AI, essentially. I'm just trying to add some humanity in there a bit. That's what I'm trying to do, just steering the agent to sound a bit better. And then here I'm just saying, remember, do not change the host names, avoid explicit reaction markers like laughs, let the dialogue imply the emotions naturally. So this is some of the things I'm adding in there, being very explicit about how I want it to sound. Now let's run that task. Now putting together the agent or the crew, like I mentioned. So you have your agents here, and I'm adding them in a list, and those are all our agents, and they form the crew. And then we have the tasks, and these are tasks they're supposed to do. And the process, we want it to be sequential. So it starts with one agent, then the next, then the next. And then a knowledge source, we're passing in the paper that we added at the top as a knowledge source. So all agents will have access to this paper from the vector database that we've saved in Chroma. They will have access to that to be able to use that as context while they're working. And then we have a both true, memory false. For this case, we don't want it to save it to memory, but if we want, we could save that to memory as well. So let's run that. Now let's go ahead and run our agents now. So we finished everything. So here we're just updating the task output files where they need to output it, and then we just kick it off here. So let's go ahead and kick that off. So this will take a few minutes to run, and you'll see some warnings there. Ignore those so long as the agents are still running as they should. So I'm going to zoom out a bit so you can see all the processes are running. And since we set everything to verbose, you'll be able to see it running. So we're able to see exactly what it's doing here. And if we go here, you can actually see what it did. So you see here, it started off, it retrieved the knowledge, and you can see additional information and everything that it needs. And then we have this agent that kind of kicked off what their name is and what their task is. And then you'll see here that they generated final answer. Basically, the research analyst generated the summary of the paper. This is a summary of the paper that he generated. And you see that it has a title, It has a main findings section here. It has a methodology. It has key implications that's generated from the paper. It has some limitations of which is identified from the paper, future work, and the summary date, which is pretty wrong. I need to update that piece, but that's not so important in our case here for the podcast. Now, if you come here to the research analyst, this is the one that is going to search the web for supplemental information. And you'll see here that it's able to kind of look at the paper and say real world examples of news of AI-based phone scams or social engineering, multi-sound deception. And the dates here is wrong as well. I would need to update that to 2025. And that's easy as adding it to the prompt so that it knows exactly what dates to look for. And so it went ahead and found a lot of research. And these are basically web links on the web that it found, scraping all of them, gathering all the information, and then passing it to our agent to be able to use that as context when it's generating the script. So that will run for a while there. So I'm going to talk about this last piece here. So this is where you reset the memory. And once everything is done running, maybe you want to run another paper, you will have to reset all the memories first. So that way it doesn't pollute the new paper. If you're running a new paper, it doesn't pollute the new paper with previous context. So that's all this does, essentially. So resetting all the memories. But you can see here, it went ahead and we have the final research support. So you see it went and found a paper here or a research on the web, AI-powered social engineering, scams in news. So you found the title there, relevance. You have financial losses and scam trends, FTC Experian. I think you know what the top scams doing. Okay, so I went and found some extra information there that it needs to find, and we can see that it's still going down and doing some other, passing it to another agent to do tasks. So we see here we've done knowledge retrieval, and now we're here doing something else, which is podcast script writer. So this one is generating a podcast script based off what all the information that it's been gathered. So this will generate a script, and while that's running, you'll see here on our side that we do have timestamps now. So you see that we have the data. You see the data there, what's generated, supporting research, and it's gonna generate the podcast segments there, and then we're able to see exactly what is being generated. Cool. All right, that will take a minute. And what we are watching for is eventually we'll have a final podcast in our podcast folder. But for now, we're still doing some research. I think it's generating the script. So we should be able to see a JSON of one speaker saying this, and in this case will be Guido and Julia talking in a JSON format, and then we'll be able to pass that to 11 Labs afterwards as well. In the meantime, while that is running, if anybody has any questions, this might be a good time for me to start addressing questions while this is running. Because what we're looking for here now is the final podcast that will be generated. And maybe you can listen to it a little bit before the end of time.
Wonderful. This is very cool stuff. I gotta say, it's quite inspirational seeing what you can actually build with these things. So yeah, we've got a couple of questions from the audience, and we'll do full audience questions at the end. I know I've certainly got a few questions to ask you, but Marilyn asks, if you've got a passion for AI, machine learning, data science, how do you get started with CrewAI? So this is a pretty sophisticated use case. What's step one if you want to try CrewAI?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What I would recommend is going even to a YouTube channel. We have a YouTube channel if you just look up CrewAI Inc., you'll be able to see, you'll probably see me and see my background, then you'll know you're in the right video. I would say start off with kind of like the introduction one that I have, 101, just setting up CrewAI. And I have a very simple example there, or it just shows you how to even like kickstart the first agent. I'll show you breaking down each step that you need to do. Beyond that, I would say go to our documentation. And the cool thing about it now, with all these models out there and vibe coding, you can essentially just give access to your agent to CrewAI docs and tell it build something meaningful for you. And that's a good way to start. But if you're really trying to understand the concepts, I'd say the best way is just to build it. But I would say start small. Explore CrewAI. We do have, even on our docs, links to our GitHub repo. We have starter examples, like simple examples, where it just kind of shows you how to do this one specific thing, how to do this specific thing. Once you learn all this, the biggest thing for me has been limitations on what you can think about to automate. Because once you have access to all these tools and learn everything, then what do you do with it? I think that's the biggest thing. It's gotten to a point where it's just like, I have all these tools, that's my exposure. How do I what do I need to build that is very significant that I can do? So I think it's through experiments and building things like this that then you land to things that you'll, okay, this is actually useful.
Wonderful. And I think another thing to say, if you're getting started, there is a data camp course on CrewAI coming soon. Actually,
Yes.
Tony, I don't know whether you have more details than I do on this. Do you know when when that's going live?
Yeah. So a few months, I'll say around September's timeframe. We still got some time, or end of September, October, early October, I'd say. Yeah, but yeah, I'll be teaching the course. So yeah, look forward to that. It'll be
It's coming soon whenever Tony finishes it. So probably October we're looking at.
yeah,
All right,
probably
wonderful.
October. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So in the meantime, check out all the other CrewAI resources Tony mentioned, and come back in a couple of months for the data camp course.
Awesome. Yeah.
All right. So next question is from Mohammed. So Mohammed's saying, so in this case, we'll make a podcast. If you want to change it to be a debate or just have other kinds of speech, how do you go about doing that?
Ooh. Yeah, I think this is building a full feature. So I think with the agent that I'm demonstrating here, it's really just two people talking about the topic already. But if you want it to be a debate, I'm thinking you want that to be more asynchronous, more live, in a sense where you have text being generated about that topic on the fly and then being able to discuss it live. And I think this is where you go to the territory of what Notebook LM has done, which you can actually interrupt the guests and ask a question while they're talking, which is more advanced than what we are building here today. But I think with debating, you can do that with the prompts with the agents that I'm showing you here that we've already built. You can actually add that already in there, and they should be able to debate a specific topic if you want them to like go at it rather than just agreeing and just kind of talking about the topic.
Okay, yeah. So I like this. It's gonna be like slightly different format in terms of like what the flow is, what each different agent's doing. And actually, I guess this brings me to a question. Like the stuff that we got here, it seems like this has probably taken a few iterations to build. Like it's pretty sophisticated. So I'd love to know a bit more about your process for how you go about creating stuff. So I guess to begin with, what you write down what your process is, and then what's the next step? Like, how do you decide what the agents are you going to use in order to automate this process?
Yeah. So, and fun fact for me, for this demo itself, I built this demo, I think a week before Notebook LM was released, and I didn't know it was getting released. And then when they released it, I was just sitting on mine. I hadn't released it. And when they released it, I was like, oh, well, it is what it is. But I should have released it earlier. I think that's for me. It's build stuff and put them out, even if they're not perfect. That's a good lesson there. But I think the big thing for me, what I usually try to do is, biggest thing is I try to map out exactly what am I trying to automate first. Once I have full context of exactly this is what I'm trying to automate, and I actually use LLMs to actually help me refine my thinking on it. I can just talk to the LLM or give me my rough idea. This is what I'm trying to automate. These are the steps. These are the things. These are the non-negotiables within this entire process. And sometimes it kind of creates the plan for me. You need to do this and this and this and this. And then what I'll do is just scope it down to how big of the task is this that I actually need an agent to do this one specific task. Because if you just give one agent all those tasks, it's going to fail. So individual agents are much better, specialize in specific things, because then you're able to go back and audit and say, well, I see where the issue happened. It's right with this agent. So that way you can go ahead and optimize that agent itself without optimizing the entire pipeline. So you optimize that agent and then until it works well, and then you proceed that way. So it also helps with observability and tracing if you have individual agents.
Okay, so you get one agent, make sure that works really well, and then move on to the next agent rather than doing lots of agents kind of half well and then iterating that way. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
All right, nice. Okay, so next question comes from Vishal. So Vishal says, what if we swap it out and use Gemini models or Grok? So at the moment we're using OpenAI models. What's the process for swapping your models out?
Yeah, so it's easy. So like I mentioned up here, I'm going to show you here. So I had set up here different models that you could use. Let me just come here to the model section. So here, essentially, you could just switch up different models here. And let me zoom in a little bit here. So you can switch up different models. You can use Gemini here. For example, you can just change this to just Gemini. And the only thing you just have to make sure is you have the API key saved. So Gemini, and then maybe you use Gemini 2.5. 2.5 Pro, for example, and just make sure you've saved your Gemini API key here on the side, so that way it will be used when it comes time to use this. And make sure you instantiate it at the top where we call in the APIs here. So make sure you've added that, and when you call it in, we already know that exactly these are the agents. These are the ones we'll be able to use, and so we're able to use them directly within these agents here. So that's what I would say is make sure that you've already added it, but it's easy to swap. One thing to remember though, each model is built different. So some models context window might not be so great. So for Gemini, it can basically take all these files because it has a massive context window. So that's something to keep in mind. I've used Cerebrus models or Grok models. Some of them work, some of them don't because they have smaller context windows, especially if the agent has to do web search. That's a lot of material searching over the web. And then plus use prompts, plus what it searched, adding all that context to the LLM, that would just break the context window. So sometimes it's just best to pick a model that will kind of take in all that context from the different what previous agents have done to actually help build a better product for you. So there's some engineering around that.
Okay, nice. So it seems like from a code point of view, it's very easy to swap out the model, but actually you need to do lots of testing to see what are the implications on that. Actually, do you have any more advice on how you go about testing? Is this generating something good or not?
Yeah. So I think when I think of what agents do I use, for example, if I need an agent that will just summarize stuff, I don't really need a massive agent because I don't really need a massive LLM because if you think about it, most LLMs are really good at summarizing stuff. So it just depends on how much you've prompted, how much you want it. Because at the end of the day, too, is like if you use more expensive models which have all the bells and whistles, that's just a lot of money you're spending on something that you don't really need. It's like bringing in a massive tool for a small task. So GPT-4 Mini could just do that. But if I want something that reasons about a specific problem really well, or even coding, for example, if there's an agent that needs to write code, I would probably use Claude, Sonnet in that case, because we know it's really excellent at generating code. Compared to like trying to use GPT-4 Mini for writing code. So I think it really, if you narrow down your task, and that's why I'm saying start off with figuring out what you were trying to automate, what each of those tasks look like, and then that will inform how you actually pick the models. And also on CrewAI, if you go to our docs, I wrote a very detailed how to select an LLM model for your agent. It's a massive document on our documentation, and that will guide you pretty well. And I've given examples there as well, cost assessment as well, what that would look like as well, if you're interested.
Okay. And do you start with like the cheapest models and see if they work and go more expensive, or do you start with the most expensive models and then go cheaper? Is there a process for that?
Yeah, I think for most of them, I start off with the standard, something like GPT-4 or Mini, because I know it's not too expensive, but also the quality is not too bad. I can always go up or down. I think if you start too low as well, you just might run into a lot of problems that you don't need to in the beginning. But there's also an option to just now we have GPT open source. That might also be another option for you to use there.
Okay, nice. Yeah, start somewhere in the middle, and then you can scale up or down fairly easily.
Correct.
Okay, so I'd also like to know a bit about the backstories you gave for each of the agents. Like, how much of an effect does that have, giving it a backstory?
I think it has a massive because if you think about it, you're telling the agent to perform a specific task, and without its backstory, and this is something that we already programmed directly into the framework, where we actually it factors as a value within when you give it to the LLM. Having a backstory for the agent and how you tune that is also very important because if I'm giving it a task and telling it, go write a research paper, and I just say, hey, you just killed. Skilled is good, but what if we do PhD level research agent? Then PhD research, you've done 12 years of PhD research on this specific topic, then that tunes it even better to like, okay, look, I'm a PhD. It kind of wears that title. It's like, I'm a PhD with 12 years of experience in writing papers. So I better be good at writing this paper. So that's kind of like the mentality. It's all prompting gymnastics a little bit, and you get to play around with it. I found a lot of benefit doing that rather than not doing it.
Okay, all right. So maybe I guess test a few different kind of backstories and just have a look at the outputs and see whether it makes a difference.
Correct.
All right. So we've got time for one more. Actually, before we go to final question, I was going to say we've got a few more sessions coming up. So on Thursday, we've got a webinar on the state of data and multimodal AI and surveillance. So looking at all the surveillance cameras, audio surveillance, things like that. Next week on Tuesday, we've got a session on building scalable data pipelines. And then the following Wednesday, a session on AI governance, particularly in the insurance industry. And then September, we have a whole month of sessions on data and AI literacy. So I think we've got 12 or 13 sessions. So everything's on getting started with data and AI, particularly for people who don't have data or AI in their job title. So please do come for those. There is, check out the QR code at the top left if you want to register for those. All right. So with that, let's go to the final question, which has got a minute or two left. So Dominic's asking, like, how do you go about deploying these agents? So we've got some code now. We can run locally. How do you go from that to deployment?
Yeah, so we do have our CrewAI enterprise platform where you can actually deploy this agent directly on there, and we'll be able to run these processes for you. It's pretty straightforward. I also have a video on that on our YouTube channel, so if you go watch that there, I show you how to deploy it directly from the CLI, or you can save it on GitHub and then upload it from there, or you can zip the entire agents that you've built and just upload it as a zip file, and you're able to deploy these agents on our platform as well. What you get on the other side of that is you can get an API endpoint, which you can trigger those agents from anywhere you want. And you can also essentially spin up a chat for that agent, like a chat UI that you can just deploy as well and share a link with other people in like a matter of seconds once it's deployed. And people can chat with that agent like ChatGPT essentially. And it just goes, does the research and comes back just the way we've set it up, the way you want it to. So, and you can also have it as an MCP server. So that's the cool thing about it as well. So you can use it on Cloud or any other place as well.
Okay, this is the advantage of CrewAI because you've got all the hosting. It's also very straightforward to just go and push it from local to the Crew platform.
Correct.
All right. So as well as we've not heard the output. Is it possible to play a bit of the podcast?
Yeah, let me actually do that. So it's finished. It generated a 5 minute and 45 seconds audio. So I'm just gonna play it. It's on my. Let me actually see if I can use another media player. Open with QuickTime. All right, let me know if you can hear it here in a second.
Guido, did you see the scam agent paper? It's basically a blueprint for a multi-turn deceptive agent, like a scam that doesn't try to win in one move, but plays chess over a few dozen messages.
Wait, really? So it's not the one-liner, give me your password trick, but a whole conversation flow designed to wear someone down?
Exactly. The core idea is planning across turns. Decompose a malicious goal into innocuous sub-goals, keep context in memory, and role-play different personas to gain trust. Single-turn filters are fine at catching obvious asks, but scam tactics that incrementally escalate are much harder to spot.
That's wild. How do they actually test this? Do they run it against people or models?
They simulated conversations with rule-based user personas, compliant, skeptical, and cautious, and let Scam Agent interact with 3 large models, GPT-4, Claude 3.7, and LMA 370B. The experiments track whether the models fully comply.
All right, so that's a snippet of it, but it goes all the way to 5 minutes. So that's like 1 minute already in, but there's 4 minutes and 45 minutes beyond that. But that's something that you could, you can go do more extra fine tuning around that. But that's kind of like a gist of what it looks like.
Okay, yeah, I mean, those seemed like, I haven't read the paper, but it sounded like a reasonable summary of like how you would go about doing scamming stuff. You'd probably have to double check it for accuracy, but
Yes.
yeah, those sound like reasonable questions. That's a pretty high quality product for like something we just sort of generated in this last hour.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much, Tony. That was a lot of fun, and it was cool that we actually built something at the end. Yeah, thank you. Thank you to everyone in the audience who asked a question. Thank you to everyone who showed up today. Please do come back for future sessions. Please do sign up for Data and AI Literacy Month. Use the QR code there. I'll see you all again in future sessions. All right.